My name is Charles Stevens. I started at Microsoft in 1984 and I left in 2006. I was born in London, England, and grew up in London, but also in near Winchester in Hampshire in the country. So I lived on a river, and so I spent most of my time in the river fishing and having fun with dogs. But then I went to boarding school when I was very young, at 8 years old, an all-boy boarding school, and I was basically living at school from 8 until I went to college when I was 18. So after school, after university, I decided I wanted to come to America and learn more about business and particularly marketing. So I was lucky enough to get into Harvard Business School, and I brought my wife with me, and she had a legal career, and we lived in Boston for 2 years, and I was learning about business. I became very excited about Microsoft and about the personal computer industry because personal computers were coming out in this sort of 1982, early 1980s. And it seemed to me software would be, as Bill Gates said, the soul of the new machine. I worked for Hewlett-Packard in Silicon Valley while I was at Harvard. They were building new personal computers, more engineering computers than personal computers, but I could see the power, and I could see the power shifting from the mainframe and these mini computers I was using at Harvard down to the PC and down to the individual end user. And I thought Microsoft was at the leadership of that, and it was worth taking a risk to join Microsoft in those days. I met Steve at Harvard when after he was giving a speech. I was asking him questions, and I jumped in a taxi with him. Microsoft wasn't interviewing on campus in those days, not for MBAs or business students. They were interviewing technical computer science students. But he said, in the taxi, why don't you come back? We need some help with marketing and also the retail channels, because Microsoft was about to start selling products through the retail channel, and you might be able to help us with that. So then I came out and visited Seattle and had an interview schedule with about 7 or 8 people. And at the end of the day, they offered me a job. They weren't sure what the job would be, but it was going to be in product management, in marketing. I showed up at Microsoft in July 1984, and I was sitting in the waiting room, and people were passing through. I think they'd forgotten I was even showing up. And eventually someone rushed by, and that was Rob Glazer. And he said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "I'm waiting to find out what job I'm going to do." And he said, "Well, we need a product manager on Microsoft Word. It's our new word processing product. And do you want to do that?" And I said, "Sure." It was still version 1.0 of Microsoft Word on MS-DOS. And the next day we went to a meeting with Bill Gates, Steve Ballmer, Jeff Rakes, and Bill Gates got up and said, "We should cancel this product. None of these applications are selling. They're all a disaster, multi-plan, Word, and so on. We should just cancel it and get out of the applications business." And then there was a huge discussion and a row. Rob Glazer, Charles Simone, Jeff Rakes, Steve Ballmer. And in the end, we decided, no, we have to push on. We had to keep trying. And if we innovated and kept improving the products, we could be successful. So we decided, luckily for my job in this case, that we weren't going to get out of the applications business. The challenge was we were the 11th best-selling word processor, not the 11th best-selling application. The 11th, there were 10 word processors that sold better than Microsoft Word. So my challenge was to find out what the problems were with the product, what customers thought. So the first thing I did was a survey of customers, and as there were very few, it was quite easy to find them, and they didn't like much about the product. But we started really investing in later on that the Apple Macintosh came out, and we decided to do Microsoft Word on the Macintosh, really a new product, and Excel, which of course is a new product too. And Microsoft Word on the Macintosh was a really good product, like Excel. And then the applications business started growing, and we were able to bring those products back, including PowerPoint, which we bought, back to Windows when Windows became successful. And then we had an applications business. I remember a very interesting meeting with John Shirley, who was president at the time, and Jeff Rakes. And because our applications weren't selling, Jeff Rakes and I came up with the idea we would bundle them together and call them Microsoft Office. And there would be 4 boxes literally stapled together, and you would get 4 applications for the price of 1.5. We would do this on the Mac. We would do this on MS-DOS. Windows wasn't out. And John Shirley said, "This is either going to bankrupt the company or we might be successful." But he gave us the okay to do that. And that was the genesis of Microsoft Office. There was no integration between the applications. They're not a seamless experience like they are today or much later, but they came at a great price. So you could buy 4 not particularly good applications on MS-DOS, very good applications on the Macintosh, and run them all for a very good price. And that's how Microsoft Office started, and I was the first product manager for that. We had 4 products that were well integrated on the Mac, and then, of course, later on Windows, and that proved to be the winning strategy. I'm proud of being part of the Microsoft Word for many, many years, and helping that move from number 11 to consistent number 1 on the charts, thanks to the product on the Mac and the product on Windows, the product on MS-DOS, and just a fantastic development team that kept improving the product. And I'm very proud of Office because that was a breakthrough. A lot of us worked on that, but that was a breakthrough that became the competitive advantage along with very strong products. Then Mike Maples came and he broke up the applications business into business units, and I was chosen to lead the database business unit, and that was a new product line. We didn't have a database product, so we built a product called Access, and it had to compete against very, very strong database products, notably DBase from Ashton Tate, which was number 1, Paradox from Borland. These were $800, $900 products. They didn't have, of course, an Office strategy, but we built Access only on Windows, very easy to use, very powerful. It had the Visual Basic language built in. And we sold it at $99, even though it was very powerful, against products that were $800, $900 that weren't available on Windows. And we sold like 100,000 units in the first month. We started out as the number 1 selling database product in the first 3 months on the PC. So after Access, I went to work for Steve Ballmer. I moved from the product organization into more sales role. Steve was running worldwide sales at that time, the US and all the international subsidiaries. He wanted me to come and work for him and just help him in terms of managing the business strategy for all these subsidiaries. And about a year into that, he came into my office and said, "Would you like to go to Japan?" And I said, "I'd love to go to Japan. I've never been to Asia. I'd love to go and visit them. What can I do for you?" He said, "Well, actually, I want you to run the region." So I went, visited in Japan. This region at the time included Japan, China, which was growing very fast, South Korea, which was the 6th biggest. Japan was the 2nd biggest subsidiary in the world after the US. South Korea was the 6th biggest subsidiary. And then, of course, Taiwan, and Hong Kong. The business there was incredibly complicated. The US is a big subsidiary and, of course, the large European subsidiaries, but Japan is much more complicated because of the language. The products are all different. The competitors are different. The culture is very different. But I decided it'd be very exciting, so I moved my whole family to Japan for 3 years to run that Far East business. So when I went to Japan, there were about 2,000 people, maybe across all the region, with Japan being about 1,000 people. I'd never run a business that big. In these subsidiaries like we have today, you have a country manager running each country. So I wasn't taking the reins directly over of making decisions for each subsidiary, but I had to learn a lot. I suppose I took a year to learn everything, learn the business, learn the culture. A lot of our products needed a lot of changes. Word was not competitive at all because of the language differences. Exchange was having a very difficult time. The best-selling products were SQL Server and Windows NT. And then as soon as I came, Windows 95 launched around the world in 1995, a year after I arrived there. And it was a massive success in Japan and Asia because of the graphical interface and all the features. And Windows 95 supported the internet, which was growing fast in countries like Korea and Taiwan. So there were parties in the street when we launched Windows 95. There was TV coverage on the main news, not the technical news, on the main news. NHK was showing Windows 95 being launched. People were partying and having a great time all over, mainly in Tokyo, but in other cities as well. And then our business in Japan, but also in this region, doubled every year. Every year I was there, it doubled in size. The number of people we had doubled in size. And I remember Steve Ballmer saying at an annual sales meeting where all the subsidiaries are at, "This is the most crazy, amazing thing I've ever experienced at Microsoft, that a big subsidiary like that could double in size 3 years in a row." And a lot of that was the great people we had there, and the products were coming around and being really well adapted for for Asian countries. And it was the most exciting time I had at Microsoft, probably. So when I came back from Japan in 1997, the world had changed and Microsoft had changed a lot. And Steve Ballmer had changed the whole sales organization into what was called customer units. And so we have different customer units in the field. And I was asked to start a new customer unit, which we call the Application Developer Customer Unit. Eventually that became Business Solutions Group. And the focus of that was working with ISVs, big software developers, enterprise ISVs, to try and get them to move their products onto Windows NT, L Server Pro, and SQL Server primarily, as well as working with Office and Windows. The biggest challenge in those days, in the late 90s, in the server space, was convincing customers we had really robust, secure, reliable server products, Windows NT, SQL Server, Exchange. Could they replace Oracle and IBM with these products? That was a big gamble for customers. The big consulting companies who competed with IBM Consulting, which was very strong, these were allies. And these partners were critical to validate the platform, but also to get customers using the platform. And my goal was to grow that server business 15% a year in the enterprise space, which is where most of it was sold. And it's on-premise software in those days. There wasn't a cloud. So we actually increased it 25% in the first 3 years. We had this application developer customer. So the step for me after the application developer customer unit and business solutions and all the vertical markets is Steve Ballmer and Jeff Rakes asked me to run enterprise sales, which of course is a big setup. In enterprise sales at that time, we had 12,000 people. This was in 2002, 12,000 people in sales in all the subsidiaries in the US. We had people in consulting. We were building up the consulting business. Our enterprise support was super important. I learned when running a sales organization, when I came back to the US, to run a sales organization, you have to be close to the customer and close to your partners. And so it makes sense to mirror who those customers and partners are. But you also need a very strong team. But in sales, we need women, we need minorities, we need veterans. I heard a lot of veterans. We need different people of different persuasions to be successful. And the reason is we need to mirror our customers. We need to recruit much more broadly. We need better decision making. It turns out, and there's lots of evidence, even this is back in the early 2000s, that more diverse teams make better decisions because more voices are heard. They collaborate better and they execute better, which was key to me when I learned in Japan. You've got to execute. A great decision is no good if you can't execute it with a lot of customers or a lot of employees. So what drove me was it was the right thing to do, but it made business sense as well. And it made business sense, but also in every review, we used to do annual reviews. We used to report on sales and market channel. I would report on diversity every time. What were our goals? We had specific goals. Did we achieve them? What mistakes did we make? What did we have to do to fix this? To me, that was a business goal as well as an employee satisfaction goal. And it just proved to me many times that was another route, an important route, a critical key route to being successful. I wanted to execute on diversity. I didn't want it just to be an idea or a good thought. I wanted it to be proven to work in the field of a big line organization. I think what I'm most proud of in the end is being able to navigate the culture shift from risk-taking, make fast decisions, grab for market share, do anything it took in word processing or Office or database to a more collaborative, better communicator. And I think the thing I'm most proud of is hiring and build as well as building teams. On through my career at Microsoft, I always invested in hiring. I insisted on hiring loops, always had diverse candidates on them when I was back in the US in enterprise sales. And those hiring decisions, if you hire the right people, the right culture that are different than you, have different ideas, but are entrepreneurial, quick thinking, collaborators, they can change organizations. They can change the company. But I think in my case, what was key, or I was lucky, was I would be asked to take, every 3 or 4 years, I was asked to take on new roles. And they were demanding roles where I didn't have all the answers, but I was always willing to take them on. I felt I had enough to contribute to start with, but that I would learn a lot. And if I worked with great teams, anything was possible. So I was always willing to take that risk. I would never be a corporate vice president if I hadn't been willing to leave for Japan, where I'd never been in my life, and run the largest subsidiary in the world and several other major countries like China and Korea. So I took on risks, but I had great support from management, from Bill Gates, Steve Ballmer, Jeff Rakes. I had great teams. I brought in new people. I hired like crazy. I focused on diversity and equity, and that strengthened me as a leader. And I think the greatest legacy I can leave, or most people can leave, are the people you hired who've been successful at Microsoft or in other walks of life, the people that you've mentored or led or helped grow in their skills, and the people that you've interacted with. So I hope people think of me as someone they could trust, they have high integrity for. And I hope those values I pass on to my family, my children, my grandchildren. I certainly think they uphold those values, and that's what is important in their careers as well. So that's the impact I hope I've had on people.